All of the media messaging about HIV is that it's a manageable illness. I think trans folks living with HIV are still living a completely different reality.
So many of the issues that we faced in the 80s, we continue to face.
We are where the country was 30 years ago.
The day I got my diagnosis, I call it the coldest day.
I tested positive on September 26, 2008.
Right before my 28th birthday.
At the time, I was given 5 years to live.
I left without an offer of continuing care, an offer for case management, an offer for anything.
There wasn't any place for us to go. Everything was predominantly gay support groups or trans women support groups.
It felt like an incredibly isolating experience in different ways.
I thought I was going to be the next one to die.
My thought is, well, if I've only got 3 months to live, I might as well just keep drugging. After like 4 years, I figured I wasn't going nowhere.
I went to the doctor and I got my medicine and I started trying to take care of myself. That day, I rose from the dead.
Back in the day, in the 80s and the 90s, there was never good data collection on trans folks.
There was so much more data around injection drug users, gay men who have sex with men.
People were not even recognized as existing, let alone being at risk for HIV/AIDS. It wasn't until 1996 that the San Francisco Department of Public Health was able to start doing research to get some solid data.
The ways that data has been reported has been really inaccurate. And with trans men, there's just almost no counting us at this point in time.
When we look at more recent, the small data sets that are available, more than 1 out of 2 Black trans women are going to contract HIV during our lifetimes.
1 out of 3 trans Latina women is HIV positive.
Miami and Fort Lauderdale, they are the first and the second place in new infections in HIV nationwide.
We're seeing that with Black trans women, we still are dying at earlier rates.
I think it's important that we understand the social factors that contribute for trans people, and particularly trans women of color, to become infected.
The ways the epidemic and gender, race, class are colliding, trans folks are sort of at the nexus of a number of systems of oppression.
Anyone that lives outside of like gender norms are more likely to experience violence on that level.
Hate violence and discrimination and police harassment, a lack of family acceptance, lack of societal acceptance, difficulty getting an education, difficulty getting culturally competent health care.
It can be extremely difficult for a person of transgender experience to receive health care in Alabama. Many doctors are afraid of the stigma that will fall on them if they treat the transgender community.
There's still a lot of ignorance in the healthcare. Me personally, don't feel comfortable revealing that I'm trans to when I go to my primary care or if I'm in a hospital.
Imagine me going to one medical doctor to concerning about my health, see people who working over there laughing on me and think my health is ridiculous.
For many trans feminine folks in particular, there's such rampant employment discrimination.
I couldn't even go at McDonald's and get a job.
They're looking at your application and looking at you and laughing and then throwing it in the trash can in your face.
If I can't get a job, I still got to feed myself. I still got to have a place to stay.
And I had to do like transactional sex work to make money to survive.
Most folks who are engaged in sex work, they are doing it because it's something that validates them and empowers them, and we need to respect that.
Trans men actually engage in monetary sex work as well as our sisters, and we just don't talk about it.
A lot of us are survivors of child molestation, so we don't feel that we have agency over our bodies.
I transitioned in my 30s, right? And so I had, I'm 52, so I was raised with a particular version of girlhood.
I was taught that, it's better to be seen, not heard.
And I know that stuff also leaves me incredibly vulnerable to sexual coercion, sexual assault, right?
The need to be accepted is so compelling in transgender women's life that a lot of times it is more important than the health. If a John says that they'll give you $100 extra if you don't use protection, and you have to put food on the table, what would your decision be?
Many members of the trans community have a criminal record already. A lot of it could be related to survival crimes in the past.
I was using heavy drugs. I was, doing sex work, and as a result, I ended up in the correctional system.
Things like sex still goes on in jails. Girls like me become very popular when we come to jail. And for somebody who's done sex work, it becomes second nature. So we do what we do in order to survive.
Being transgender in prison drastically increases your chance of contracting HIV. You have no access to prophylactics or anything else to protect you.
I was a trans woman on hormone therapy while incarcerated, but yet they placed me in a facility with men while I was sexually abused almost daily.
I'm not talking about just by the inmates, I'm talking about by the officers as well.
While I was in there, I filed a lawsuit against the Georgia Department of Correction. They failed to protect me, and there I fell in love with law. I realized that this is a tool to combat oppression.
The community can be dealing with HIV. It doesn't mean that you always have to be in the role of a victim.
I wanted to do the work and advocate for people like me living with HIV.
And another thing is you can't have anything trans without involving trans.
We don't need you to save us. What we need you to do is to create the space and let us save ourselves.
It's our experience. We know how to combat these systems because we've lived it.
Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera in 1970, they created the Star House, and it was a place that transvestites, which is the term that was used, that transvestites who were homeless could come and stay there. And so as a person who works in public health, I often hear, well, we don't know how to get trans women off the street, so we don't know where to place them. Well, 49 years ago, two hookers and whores in New York City figured out how to do it, but yet we can't figure out how to do it in a major city like Atlanta? It is important for the system to trust us to take care of ourselves because we've been doing it all along anyway.
A lot of the issues that we're dealing with are not going to be resolved by simply HIV testing and passing out condoms. There has to be an understanding of how historical trauma has impacted our community and how that shows up in how we have agency over our bodies. Too often what organizations do is say, well, we're not going to give you hormones or testosterone shots if you don't adhere to an HIV regimen.
If you don't have anything to live for, and if you're not comfortable in your own body, like, why bother?
And you're not going to have a lot of success in retaining trans women and trans men who are seeking services.
I made the decision to transition in 2002. I had 33 T cells and a viral load off the chart because, I didn't have anything to live for, right? So why was I going to tolerate side effects when I couldn't envision myself in a future as an old woman? So I actually made the decision to transition sort of as a death gift to myself. And lo and behold, like when you like yourself, it gets easier to fight for a future that you can see yourself in.
As trans people, we've come a long way in the last 30-some years. But we still have so far to go. I want to see the day when everyone is celebrated for being their true self. When we say, this is who I am. And people say, yeah, be yourself, be who you are.